Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus. Gets us that much closer to Saturday Nightmares live from New York at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope to see you all there. Before we jump into this terrifying set of encounters, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter comes to us from the Philippines. This happened to my uncle on Christmas Eve 1994. He was riding his motorcycle with a friend on their way home from visiting my grandparents, who live in a small village. It had rained like crazy the week before. The bridge on the main road had collapsed, so they had to take another route on a dirt road around the hill. They'd been riding for a few moments through a dark forest when suddenly something happened. My uncle hit the brakes so abruptly they almost fell. Hundreds of monkeys were emerging from the bushes a few meters in front of them, making their way to the other side of the dirt road beyond the tree line. My uncle waited patiently until the last monkey disappeared behind the brush. Just when he was about to start the engine, another monkey walked out of the bushes. This one, my uncle said, was unbelievably huge, dark grayish, as tall as an adult. It was bulky, and it limped a little as it moved. It was walking upright, very slowly toward the bushes. Suddenly, it stopped in the middle of the road and turned its head around to look at my uncle. He said he had never felt so much fear in his life before. This gigantic monkey stood there staring into his soul. There was a flash of intimidation and wisdom in its eyes that only comes with old age, and he could see that this beast knew that they knew they were in its territory. My uncle could feel his friend shaking violently behind him. Okay, so let me share this with you. We are not really familiar with Sasquatch or Bigfoot legends where I come from. So, whatever this thing was, it was neither of these two. After what felt like minutes, the staring contest was finally over when this creature walked into the bushes to join its troop. My uncle waited for a few more moments until he was convinced no more monkeys were showing up, and caught them off guard before they had taken off. When they finally made their way out of the forest onto the main road, his friend said, "What the hell was that?" My uncle was sure that that huge monkey they had just seen was a leader of a troop. It was just trying to make sure its troop made it to the other side of the forest safely. But what scared him the most was that it never blinked while staring at them. It still gives him chills whenever he thinks about this frightening encounter. And as soon as he had gotten home, he called my grandmother to tell her that he arrived home. He also told her about this creature. She said it may have been the spirit of the forest, taking form of a gigantic monkey. According to local folklore, the forest is old and home to hundreds of ancient spirits. He was lucky he did not encounter the dangerous ones that locals believed were responsible for the mysterious disappearances of people who had taken a shortcut through the forest. Today's second encounter. My brother and I have always loved nature and wildlife. My brother's in the military and I work outdoors. We've probably spent more time in nature than most. We know animals and their distinctive sounds and their behaviors. Wolves have always fascinated us because they've always behaved strangely in our presence. Our first strange experience with wolves occurred 10 years ago. We used to go on this 4-kilometer squared island near the house, kayaking for 1 kilometer to get there. We were walking in the night, and we suddenly found ourselves surrounded by 7 wolves. We used pepper spray against them, and went and take refuge in a tree. The wolves stayed all night at the foot of the tree or near the tree. My brother returned there alone afterward. One night he was walking, and then an animal yelled at him. He did not see the animal, but the sound of it terrified him. A scream of a man with a deep voice mixed with a strident baby cry. He fired 6 rounds where the sound was coming from. The animal yelled louder and ran away. The sound of the footsteps indicated that it was running on 2 legs. It was big enough to break anything in its path. We went back and saw many signs of where we thought this was associated with a Sasquatch. This experience stayed there because we didn't really want to believe it. My brother later moved more than 400 kilometers from our place, close to one of Canada's largest protected forests. Whenever we'd go into the forest between 5 and 6 hours after we enter, we would be surrounded by aggressive wolves. When we didn't leave early enough, we'd have to shoot in their direction to scare them away, which does not really work. We've been surrounded by them a minimum of 10 times. Until recently, we thought it was a particular pack. Furthermore, to leave this wood, we must walk a few kilometers, then we take our truck, which we must make a 3 to 4 kilometer ride on an old dirt road. We were returning quietly during the night when, on my right, I saw a white light orb about 30 feet from us in this forest, floating 10 feet high. In the air, there are no houses or roads for more than 5 kilometers away. We believed it was a hiker or a hunter in distress with his flashlight, so my brother took his rifle and his headlamp and went to see into the woods. He had saw nothing and returned about 10 minutes later. When he came back, I was scared. First, he arrived from behind the truck. Until he arrived within 1 meter of the truck, what I saw in the rearview mirror was a grizzly bear. There are no grizzly bears in our area. In addition, I asked why he had turned off his lamp for 5 minutes. He told me he had never turned it off, and he always had the truck in his sights with the headlights on. There was no drop where he was. Finally, when I could not see his lamp, I saw a moose pass 10 meters ahead of the truck. Next, he had gone camping with his girlfriend about 100 kilometers from this place. During their night, they were awoken again by a pack of wolves that had surrounded them. His girlfriend had shared an encounter she had about a year ago, seeing this same light orb nearby. She also had mentioned she'd seen a grayish creature without ears crossing the road on 2 legs. In short, she didn't think about it until we told her our experiences. The wolves, the lights, this bipedal creature, a strange impression that we are not welcome a few hours before anything happens. Sorry for the English, I am French Canadian. Today's third encounter. I live in West Virginia, and although I live just outside of one of the larger cities in the state, it's still a pretty rural area. Because of this, I've grown up very familiar with the woods and wildlife, and although I'm not exactly an avid outdoorsman, I do have some knowledge, and I am not uncomfortable or overly afraid of the woods or most of the creatures that live there. To sum this up, I live in a neighborhood with other houses on 3 sides of me. But in the backyard, approximately 50 yards downhill from the house, there are woods and no other houses in that direction for over a mile. At the time, myself and my wife were separated, so I was staying at the house alone. One evening, I let the dogs out, and I noticed a pair of eyes right at the edge of the woods watching me. At first, I wasn't too concerned, as I assumed it was just a deer, which usually frequent our backyard because of our apple trees. However, after watching the eyes for a bit, they didn't move at all, and appeared to be about 8 feet off the ground, and were the wrong color for deer eyes. I took the dogs inside and got a flashlight and returned. The eyes still had not moved or looked away. They were staring directly at me when I returned, which would be unusual for a deer. Whatever it was, it had positioned out of range of my light, so I could not get a look at what it may be, and I did not feel like going down that hill and getting closer because I no longer felt that it was a harmless deer. At the time, I believed it could have been a predator, so I just went back inside and locked the door and turned off the lights in the kitchen so whatever it was would just maybe go away. Now, where this experience really began to freak me out was when I came back to the kitchen later on and discovered that the eyes still had not moved and were still staring at my mostly dark house. This isn't normal behavior for most animals, even a predator. If there was nothing too actively to hold its attention for that long of a time, it should have moved on. Long story short, whatever had stayed in that position staring at my house all night. I was unnerved enough that I couldn't sleep and kept a gun near me for the rest of the night. I would periodically check, and these eyes were there every time I looked until the sun came up. The next day I found no trace of anything in the area, no animal tracks of any kind. This was definitely not at all normal behavior for any animal I'm aware of, and the fact that it left no tracks at all freaked me out even more. That's where the encounter ended. I hadn't seen anything again. Fast forward a month later. We had a couple of heavy snowstorms this winter that had really knocked down some trees at the edge of the woods. Recently, it had been unseasonably warm, though, and I decided it'd be a great time to clean up the backyard and get rid of those trees. There was a small shed just inside the woods that has been there since before we moved. But I really never paid it too much attention. It was dilapidated, and the door was off the hinge. I didn't spend much time in or around the woods in the backyard, and it can just barely be seen from the house. So I had no reason to mess with it at all. Well, during the cleanup, I got a little curious about the shed and decided to take a look at it for the first time. To my horror, the walls, floor, ceiling of the shed were completely covered in weathered, old satanic symbols, and there were stains on the floor that looked like blood. I noped it out of there and ended up tearing the thing down and burning it along with the trees I was cleaning up. I've not been back down to the woods since. Whatever was in the woods previously had returned, though. The very night I burned the shed, I saw those eyes again, and I've seen them frequently since. On more than one occasion, I've even seen several sets of eyes. So far, nothing has happened in the house, and whatever it is has kept its distance, but I'm very concerned now. I'm afraid to go even near the woods, or even out in my backyard at that. Since then, I went out and bought one of the brightest flashlights I could find. When I tested it the night I bought it, no eyes were present. I could actually see into the woods very well from my back porch. I was pretty confident I'd get an idea of what I had been seeing when I used this light. So it's been sitting plugged in the outlet in the kitchen right next to the back door ever since. The opportunity came 2 nights later. The eyes were back again, so I grabbed the light thinking I was about to finally get some answers. Except, for some reason, it was like the batteries were dying. The light was nowhere near as bright as it had been when I tested it out the first night. I'd like to reiterate at this point that it is a rechargeable battery, and it had been plugged in waiting since the day I had bought it a couple days before. However, when I actually went to use it, the beam was weak and barely reached the tree line. I could only just make out a dark, vaguely humanoid shape before the light started to completely die. At that point, I retreated to the house and put the light back on the charger, using the same charger and outlet. Sure enough, the eye stayed there all night, but any time I tried to use the spotlight, it would just quickly die again on me. The next day, I intended to take the light back, thinking maybe it was defective, but it worked fine. It was blindingly bright again, and I could see clearly into the woods with it. I'm getting more and more convinced that something out of the ordinary is going on. So far, it hasn't done anything other than watch the house. But I'm getting more and more freaked out every time I see them. It hasn't left the woods. I'm beginning to worry about it a lot more. I really don't think it's an animal anymore. Update. I did borrow some trail cams from a buddy of mine, but they continuously took pictures of nothing. And I don't mean nothing as in nothing strange. I mean nothing as in pictures of empty woods and not a single animal. If you've never used one of these cams, they're motion activated. I figured they were being set off by branches in the wind or something, but even after moving them several times and making absolutely sure there was nothing that could set them off, I was still getting pictures with nothing on them. Don't ask for the pictures. They've been deleted since there was nothing on them. In the 2 months I had the cameras set up, I didn't get a single picture with any living creature in it. I honestly started to think they were malfunctioning, but the hunter buddy I borrowed them from assured me that his cameras had worked fine since I had returned to them, and he had shown me pictures of deer he had caught using those cameras. Weird, but not totally unexplainable. I had never used them before, and I could have been doing something wrong. I did begin to pay a little more attention to the wildlife I do see, though, particularly the deer that come into my yard near the woods to eat the apples from my trees. I never see them enter or exit the forest from the area behind my house. They would always leave the trees through the neighbor's yard and walk across their yard to get to mine, then move to the next yard over and go back into the woods. Not once, even when I startled them and caused them to run away, did they ever see them enter or exit behind my house where those eyes were showing up. Now, I know deer are pretty habitual creatures and typically follow the same trails every day, so I assumed this was just their route they had developed to get to my apples and didn't think too much about it. But it did add to my uneasiness a bit about those woods. I've continued seeing the eyes, but they never come any closer to my house, and I had mostly gotten used to them. I had little desire to go into the woods anyway, and absolutely no reason at all to ever go in there after dark, so it hasn't been an issue. Even if it's a natural animal, I get a very predatory vibe from them, so I've made sure to stay away, and I keep my dog's nighttime trips outside short and supervised. Whatever's out there is not something I want to mess with, natural or unnatural. However, last week something happened that convinced me this is definitely not just an animal. I needed to mow the yard, as it was my last day off, and it really needed to be done. It was a hot day, though, and I thought I'd wait until evening when it started to get cooler. I ended up waiting too long, and it was starting to get dark by the time I got hooked up to the lawn sweeper to my riding mower to clean up. It wasn't pitch black yet, but it was dark enough that I had my headlights on and was definitely uneasy about going to the bottom of the hill near the woods where I'd dumped my clippings. I'm an adult, though, and it needed to be done. As I turned around to pull the rope and dump the bag, though, whatever was out there was behind me. And for the first time, I was close enough to get a better look. Again, it was dark, and this thing was far enough into the trees to be hidden in a shadow. But I was able to see a silhouette of the creature instead of just its eyes reflecting light. And let me tell you, This definitely is not an owl. It's enormous, and it was emitting a low rumbling growl that was loud enough for me to hear over the engine and music in my earbuds that I always wear while mowing. Obviously, I forgot about dumping the grass and just got the hell out of there as fast as the mower would take me. I didn't even bother putting it away before running into the house through the garage. It sat in my front yard all night. I'm now absolutely convinced that whatever this is not something natural. Or at least, it is not something native to the area if it is an animal. I've seen bear. We have black bear here, although they are fairly rare to the area. This was bigger than any bear I had ever seen outside of grizzlies at the zoo, which are not native to West Virginia. I'm actually frightened now instead of being mildly unnerved. The feeling I got being near this creature was absolute dread, like I had never experienced before. It was almost like I had somehow violated our unspoken agreement of leaving each other the hell alone. I've seen its eyes out back every night since that incident, and I am concerned I've angered it or something, and things might escalate. I'm honestly ready to move at this point now that I know that this thing is definitely out there and is definitely dangerous. Today's fourth encounter. I'm using a throwaway email address. I don't really want my fiance to know about this. That's the last thing I need her to do is freak out. We moved into our new house/neighborhood last August, and when I say new house, I mean we built it brand new in a brand new neighborhood. We are in South Carolina in a fairly urbanized area. Our neighborhood backs up to an undeveloped woods and uninhabitable marsh/wetland. So, though we are close to the city, we are kind of on the cusp of unexplored areas. Just to give you a little picture. This happened to me the other night. We were in the process of buying a new mattress. The first one we bought was horrible. I never slept so bad. So right now, we've been sleeping in our guest room. We haven't gotten around to put up blinds yet, because this room never gets used, so we don't see the point buying them. We have other things that take priority. This room is in the back of our house, with 2 very large windows on the second floor. Our backyard backs up to some undeveloped plots, and some developed, with the other side of those plots being forest. We have very tall pines on the other plots. Some are over 60 feet, and very thin. They wave in the wind, and during Hurricane Matthew, it was amazing to watch them bend sideways and sway without breaking. This, of course, just gave you more of an idea about how unsettling this was. Sorry for the rambling. Back to the night. We were lying in bed. It was around 11:30 or so, and she's already asleep. I'm plugging my phone in, setting my alarm to call it a night. As I'm adjusting to the darkness, I can see one and only one of the tall pines about 50 feet from our house, bending and swaying. My eyes adjust enough that I can make out a shape of a figure grasping on, 3/4 of the way up, roughly 30 to 40 feet. It was very, very large. I don't know the exact size, but I'm 6'2", and if I imagine myself up there, then it was larger than me. It had very large and broad shoulders, long arms, muscular legs. This sounds dumb, but picture the rock. That was the outline I could see. I couldn't tell if there was hair or skin covering it. It was black, very black. I couldn't see eyes or facial features. It just hung onto the tree, both legs on the trunk, one arm holding on, the other arm hanging down. The tree just rocked with it, and its posture didn't move as it swayed the tree. I tried to sneak a pic on my phone, but it was so dark nothing came out. I didn't want to use the flash because I told myself that the room we were in is pitch black, even though there's no shades. As long as I stayed still, it wouldn't see me. So, screw that thing using the flash and possibly making it upset. It sounds cliche, but it was probably only minutes that felt like an eternity. It just swayed on that pine and never broke a pose. Then it was gone. It just dropped down off the tree below my line of sight from the window and was gone. Scared the hell out of me. I didn't want to get up from the bed to see where it went. For all I know, it could have been in the backyard below my window, waiting for me to look down. Today's final encounter. First, I'm going to say I am not a believer or a skeptic. I don't know how to describe myself. I try to find scientific explanations for things while keeping in mind it could very well be something crazy. This time, I can't really call it anything but nuts. I'm an avid hiker and hunter. I like to go into the woods for days at a time and camp and hunt and fish. I went into the forest off the beaten path as per my usual MO and went searching for a nice place near the creek with plenty of room to set up camp. Oh yeah, this is Daniel Boone National Forest. I had my survival gear, rifle, camping supplies. My buddy was with me, but he wasn't around when I ran into whatever the hell this was. About 3 days in, we were sick of fish, so I went to grab some squirrels, seeing as how they were the only thing in season. I'm not going to BS ya about hunting squirrels with a big-ass gun. All I had was my .22 and my knife. I got about 30 minutes from camp, so I was well out of sight and earshot from my buddy. I get to a nice wooded area and set up shop on a stump. First sign something was up was there was no sound, no squirrels, no birds. Second sign was the sky is darkening. There's a big storm blowing in. If you live in Kentucky, you know about these. The big lightning storm. This was my cue to get out of there, so I start to trek back to camp. I was having a good time when I saw whatever it was. It was crawling low to the ground about 100 yards ahead of me. My first thought was bear, but then it stood up, not on all fours, or on 2 legs. It had 6 limbs, 2 arms, and 4 legs. Then it hauled ass until it was out of view. Pretty freaking considering it was the middle of the day during a storm. There's a pretty distinct chance I was seeing things, but I'm just not sure. I told my friend about it, and he got an uneasy feeling and suggested we leave. He's a bona fide Appalachian mountain man, so you bet your ass as soon as that storm cleared, we cleaned up and got out of camp. Well, there you have it, folks. Today's bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there. They are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the answers, and God bless.